Okay, so last video of the unit, and then we only have one more unit left to go, so we're almost done, everybody. So congratulations for making it this far. So in this video, we are going to be talking about polynomial graphs and their zeros. So like I said in the last video, you've kind of actually already been doing this in the last unit. You just didn't really necessarily think that that's what you were doing. We are going to find out, answer the following questions. Is the graph even or odd? And then what's the degree of the graph represent? How many zeros does it have? And what are those zeros? So now remember from our introduction video, so if they don't give you the equation, you find out the degree by how many times your graph changes direction. So, and then the zeros is when the graph crosses your x-axis. And your number of zeros should match your degree. If it doesn't, then that should be raising a red flag for you. Okay. So first, we need to say if this is even or odd. So because both of them are going in the same direction, that means that this is even. So what does the degree of the graph represent? So that represents how many times your graph changes direction. So let me get out some. Okay. So if I'm looking at this, I have different color highlighters here. So if you want to grab some, I would do that. So if I start by going up, so there's one direction, we're going up. Then we're going to switch and we're going down. So now there's degree number 2. Then we're going to switch and go back up again. So this is 3. And then we're going back down again. So this is 4. So our degree equals 4. So you always want to start from the left and go to the right, just like how you would read a book from left to right. So how many zeros does it have? So the zeros are how many times it crosses your x-axis. So there are 1, 2, 3, and 4. Let's put 0 equals 4. Now your degree and your number of zeros should match. If they don't, then you've done something wrong. Or they could be imaginary, and we'll actually talk about that here in a second. And then what are those zeros? So your zeros is when you cross your x-axis. So it should be x equals something. So we have 4 of them. So x equals, x equals, x equals, and x equals. So x equals, so this is at -4. Then we've got one at -1, one at 0, now one at 2. There we go. So here we've got one end pointing down and one end pointing up, meaning that this one is odd. So our degree is, so if I start from left to going right, so we've got 1, 2, and 3. So our degree equals 3. So then we cross 1, 2, 3 times. So we have 3 zeros, which those match. So that's good. So x equals, and x equals. So this here is at -1, 0, and then 5. Okay. Okay. So we've got one end pointing down and one end pointing up, meaning that this is odd. In our degree, so 1. Now this is kind of tricky here because it kind of flatlines a little bit. So here's our second part, but then it changes to going back up again. So that's a degree of 3. So be careful with ones like that. Now, as you can see here, we only cross our x-axis once here. And I've been saying that your zeros and your degree should match, which they should. But some of ours here are what are called imaginary. And it's because this graph has been shifted down. So normally if this was right on your x-axis like it would be, then you would cross the 3 different times, but this has been shifted down. So if you remember from when we were doing quadratics, if it didn't touch the x-axis at all, then it was no solution. Well, really there is a solution there. It's just what we call imaginary. So you will go into more detail with imaginary numbers once you get into Algebra 2. So we won't really go into a whole lot of detail. Just know that there is 3 zeros, but only one of them is real and the other 2 are imaginary. So we won't go into those. So here's a case where they won't necessarily match. But there are still 3 zeros, just 2 of them are imaginary, so we don't have to solve for those. You will solve for those, like I said, once you get into Algebra 2. So we only have 1 0 here, and that's when x equals 2. Okay. Okay, so this one here. So both of these ends are pointed upward, which means that this is even. Okay, so let's find out what this degree is. So if I 1, might have to use some colors twice. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So our degree here equals 6. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, here's a case where you actually have 6 zeros. So let me talk about that for a second here. So our degree, or our zeros, is 6. So we just put only 4 dots on here though. So let's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So let's list out those 4. So this is at 1, so at -5, at -2, at 2, and at 5. Okay, so unlike this one, see how this literally only crosses through our x-axis once, so we only had the 1, 0. Well, these 2 points here, so this one and this one, are touching this twice. So it touches as it comes down here and then as it's leaving. So as our degree is changing, so it's hitting these 2 points twice. So if it hits right on your axis, that's actually 2 answers. So it's -5 2 different times. Same with our +5. So that's where you get the 6, where unlike this one, you only literally cross through that. So these 2 points you're crossing through, so that's only 1 time, where here you're touching and leaving. So same thing like when we were doing our quadratics, when it just hit there once and you said that you only had 1 answer, you technically do, because the -5 and the -5, that's only 1 answer, but it counts for 2 of your zeros, if that makes sense. And then you've got your 5 and your 5. So those only technically count as 1 because you're just repeating it. So, but that's where your 6 comes from. Okay. Okay, so I want you to go ahead and do these 2 on your own. Oh, those 3. And then you've got a couple more. So then your review. So here, is your graph even or odd? What does the degree of the graph represent? Explain that. Is it positive or negative? Explain. The end behavior, how many zeros does it have? What are those zeros? Do the number of actual zeros match the degree of your polynomial? So let's actually do one of these together. Okay, so both of our ends are pointed upward. So part A, if they're both pointed up, that means that it's even. So our degree, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Our degree is 4. So now we need to explain this. So it's even because both of our ends are pointed up. Both ends are going in the same direction. And that, in this case, is up. Okay. So is this positive or negative? So this one is positive, and that's because our end behavior, or ends, is facing up. So now we need to describe that end behavior. So remember, this quadrant here is the positive quadrant. And this one here is the negative positive quadrant. So our left side, which is over here, x goes towards negative infinity, and our y is going towards positive infinity. Then the right side, our x is going towards positive infinity, and our y is also going towards positive infinity. Okay, so then how many zeros does it have? So 1, 2, 3, but this one here is like that last one, so it touches and goes. So this one has 4 zeros. So then what are those zeros? So we have the -4, then x equals -1, and it equals the -1 twice, and then x equals the +1. And then last, so do the number of actual zeros match the degree of the polynomial? Yes, because the graph touches the x-axis 4 times. Now, so if it were to be, if you were answering that here, we would say no, because it only crosses the x-axis 1 time. Okay, so then you will finish those, and then we are done. So you can work on your IXLs and then your homework, and then let me know when you are ready to quiz and test. Okay, have a great day.